an unprecedented, I would say, unprecedented exercise in this country. François Hollande sitting down for an hour on breakfast radio. First, there was a hard-hitting one-on-one with RMC's Jean-Jacques Bourdin, followed by listeners' questions.
If I fail to lower the unemployment rate, how could I claim to be capable of handling the job in the years following the 2017 election? I couldn't. I'm committed to this objective, to the obligation. It will be proof that the country has emerged from the situation I found it in if I manage to decrease unemployment. It's my obsession.
Yes, François Hollande renewing his pledge to be a one-term president should the jobless rate stay high. Well, joining us now, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, columnist at the Sunday Telegraph. Thanks for being with us. The president's message, this is interesting because it was both simulcasted on radio and television. I watched the TV. You heard it on the radio. What did it sound like?
I heard it initially on the radio. What was very interesting, and this is going to sound strange, I mean, he isn't saying much different that he has said before. The way he delivered it was a little bit like Nicolas Sarkozy. There was this sort of way of saying, I do this, I'll do that, and which was very, very different from the usual vacillation. And sometimes he went back to it when he started trying to explain the Leonardo case, which is the case of this Roma family who were expelled, and then the daughter was offered by the president himself the possibility to come back to France, which she refused. And he was just as messy as the story was. But it was very interesting that he was obviously, he had been coached and he'd been trying very hard to sort of give a very different image. I'm on radio, I don't think it worked so well, but possibly it had worked better on television. It was certainly a different format.
An unprecedented format.
It's unprecedented for France, and it's not so much unprecedented because they all go through this with 3 or 4 star interviewers in France who do this on radio regularly and have been doing this for 20, 30 years. One is called Jean-Pierre Elkabbach, Jean-Jacques Bourdin is another, and it's something that they're used to doing and what they still do, and possibly you will never find a French politician who's not doing that, is they don't joke and they do not answer the questions. You know, you ask a question and they go into a set piece and they're not interrupted. And so it's not really...
I hear there was interruptions aplenty.
To my ear, not so much.
Well, it looked that way on television. At one point in the conversation, the interviewer sets up the president a little bit. The president gets asked if he loves France.
Parlez de la France. Aimez la France, faites vivre la France. Vous êtes la France. La France, c'est un grand pays.
Alors,
et quelquefois, moi, je me désole, que ce soit en France qu'on dise parfois le plus de mal de nous-mêmes, alors que partout dans le monde, on nous regarde comme un pays qui a des valeurs, un mode de vie, une conception même de la liberté,
alors,
qui devrait faire notre fierté.
Puisque vous aimez les Français, comment allez-vous baisser leurs impôts? Puisqu'on parle de retournement.
Jean-Jacques Bourdin.
There you go. This is unprecedented. What do you think? Is this a format fit for a French president?
Well, I know it's shocking for the French. I mean, it is shocking because nobody ever contradicts the man in power. But this is hardly Jeremy Paxman. This is hardly Newsnight on the BBC. This is not hard-hitting. This is what people think it is hard-hitting because the French have got this vision of the president is that the president is Louis XIV.
He says, so if you love France, how are you going to lower the taxes?
Yes. I mean, he was waffling. Honestly, it's, you know, who's going to say no to do you love France? And Bourdin was quite right in asking, well, you know, how will you lower the taxes? Because that's the only question that people are interested in. They're also interested in employment. But I don't consider this really hard-hitting. I mean, it says a lot to what the French believe is acceptable in the way to address the powerful that you think that this is hard-hitting. I don't think it is.
I'm asking if it's hard-hitting. I'm also asking Anne-Elisabeth Moutet if the...
It's a general you.
It's the format is a strategy on the part of the president. Is it a winning strategy to speak more directly to the people? There was a second half. There were listeners' questions, and it was things like, I only earn 600 euros a month because of my benefits. It was this kind of very personal sort of stories that were being told by those listeners. What do you think of the strategy of the president taking part in this kind of exercise?
Well, again, Sarkozy did this in a much more staged way when he did a program in 2011 in which he addressed the French, and there were lots of people who'd been vetted, of course, but in the studio. It was a bit like those Obama sort of general interviews, the village
town hall meetings.
Town hall meetings. I'm sorry, I had a lapse here. But that was interesting. He's in a very difficult situation anyway. I mean, in terms of a format, he has to change because he is the least popular of all French presidents. Some of the figures give him 13% popularity, and actually there was a poll on the website.
At one point he said, "I have nothing to lose."
Well, it could go below 10, but on the website you could see, would you vote again for François Hollande? So presumably the people who had voted for François Hollande were the ones who were supposed to answer, and it went down to 13% people saying they would vote for him, and 87 said they wouldn't. That is worrisome, and it's a very difficult situation. But and the other thing is that the French at the same time say that politicians should listen to their real problems, but they like them to have this kind of hauteur. They like them to have this kind of distance. They like them to talk down to them. That's the.
I was going to say there's no country,
secret.
there's no other country in Europe where the executive branch of government concentrates so much power. Again, is this a little bit of a shift, do you think, having this kind of format where the journalist gets to interrupt the president a bit?
Well, we've seen it's true, but again, it's the job of the journalist to interrupt the president. But what's very interesting is that ever since he was elected president, his ministers have basically said what they wanted. And that's also something that is entirely new. When the French system since de Gaulle was that you had the president, and everybody did what the president wanted. And every now and then the president set up a prime minister to be a kind of a circuit breaker. The prime minister was supposed to be the one who got unpopular, and the president was floating above the waters, and he would not soak up all the unpopularity. But in this case, and especially with the new prime minister, Manuel Valls, it's Hollande who's the circuit breaker for his prime minister, which is not the way France should be organized. And to some extent, Sarkozy has started that because he was so active that
he treated his prime ministers like chiefs of staff. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's very different. You've got people voting against the president in the House, or you've got MPs who vote against him. I mean, what is this party without whips? What is this place where you can't get a vote with the people from your own party who owe you their seats and their safe seats and everything? And it's the fact that he's not respected among his own people. The last of the figures which have been climbing down steadily ever since he was elected. It started, of course, with the right-wing electors who decided to give him a chance and were disillusioned very fast. But now it's entirely the left-wing voters. It's entirely the people who did vote for him who say he's not a socialist, he doesn't care about the people, he is bumbling ahead doing the policies that the right-wing president would be doing. And the most severe criticism I've heard of François Hollande in the past year came from the left and not from the former opposition, from the opposition.
And right now, when you heard the president, there was this sense that that he'd hit rock bottom, and perhaps there was light at the end of the tunnel. He talked about growth. There was an argument over how much growth. Obviously, it's still anemic, but the sense that things will get better.
Well, he's been contradicted by the Brussels Commission only yesterday, who said, we do not believe in the French assessment of their growth. We think France will only grow by next year by 1.5%. But for almost 2 years, I mean, almost since he arrived, he has been of the opinion, and he's told it to enough people around him, that there is such a thing as a long cycle, and that we're getting to the end of the cycle, and growth will happen in France without France having to make hard choices, because the other countries in the Eurozone will grow, and because America will grow back, and because Japan is growing back, etc. And the crisis
which is
true. But it is not going to be enough because France is not going to be competitive enough. And I think that's something that he is not getting his head round to yet. And what the French here, possibly they're wrong, is it's more of the same. Is we don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything. We'll just wait, and we'll, eventually it will get better because everybody else is doing better. at the very least, it's not a very sort of motivating way of tackling the question of growth. It's not, we can do this, we're competitive in that. And what he does is he says, oh, such and such an offer. He takes the instance of a French company called Alstom. And Alstom, which built something that the French are very proud of, which are the high-speed trains and lots of technology, is now under offer by two foreign buyers. One is Siemens, and because they're German and part of Europe, they are being favored by the French. And the other one is the American GE.
Well, that's not everyone in the government who's saying that. But just a final question for you, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. The president changed prime ministers after a thumping in local elections. They're due to another thumping when the European elections take place later this month. Did he change his cabinet at the right time? Is it a fresh start?
It's a good question. I don't think they could have gone to the European elections with the old cabinet. So probably you had to do it. And it was a very courageous decision that he took to take somebody who has an eye on challenging him for the next presidential election, a very popular socialist politician called Manuel Valls. So in that respect, I think that was a very courageous choice. And right now, Valls is very popular. He's more than twice as popular, possibly 3 times as popular as the president. It promises sort of interesting things in French politics, but I'm not sure it's going to save François Hollande.
There's never a dull moment when French politics is viewed in the eye of Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Many thanks for being with us. Yeah. Stay with us. Much more to come here on France 24. We'll have more news, plus the day's business and sports. Stay with us.